serving up a little deep dive pizza today. Building a mini cabin. I'm gonna get into the nuts and bolts, measurements, everything you need to know in order to build something like this yourself, and anybody can do it. I'm gonna get into that in depth. If you want a build video, I will link my previous video, which is, it's about 8 minutes long. It's a quick and dirty video of me building this, but I'm gonna get into the details. Let's do it. First off, this thing, it's about 7 by 8, a little bit over 7 foot by 8 foot. And the reason I did that, there's no electricity here. It's an off the grid property, and I wanted to not have to cut as much wood and basically make it as easy as possible. So that's what I did. It was minimal cutting, minimal tools used. I used a drill, I used a saw, I used a hand saw, hammer, nails, main things. It cost me about 1,200 bucks total. And so that is not including the door, which I garbage picked for free. I had to paint it, I had to spend some time on it. So 7 by 8 by this front wall is, well, it's over 8 feet, but this siding here, that's an 8-foot section. And then that puts it over 8 feet with that 2 by 6. And then, you know, off the ground, it's probably about 9 foot off the ground. And then this wall here, this was about, I think this was 6'2" from here to here. I wanted enough room for me to be able to walk around. And that's kind of how I made the pitch of the roof. I didn't really plan for it to be like this. I just kind of calculated what would be a good drop for a decent snow load. So they can get a lot of snow here. This is northern Michigan. So let's start with the foundation, if you want to call it that. Not really a foundation, but let's take a look. All right, so what we have, so this is a base of gravel that was already here, and it is actually all throughout here. It's just been covered with years of debris from the trees and stuff. So anyway, I didn't get any gravel. I knew that this was stable ground, but if you just had dirt or sand, I would get a gravel pad either poured or get enough bags where you could make pads for these beams, and that is just for drainage, and it makes it so you can level them. So what I did with the foundation, if you want to call it that, these are treated 6 by 6 beams. All right, they got to be treated ground contact because they're touching the ground. These are 2 by 12s on top of that, and they are also treated, so they are actually 2 by 12s in dimension. They're not 1.5 by 11 or whatever. They're actual 2 by 12s. I figured that would be strong enough to hold everything, that, you know, hold the weight that's necessary. Now this is experimental. It's unconventional to do it like this. I just figured it would be the fastest, cheapest, easiest way to do it, and we'll see how it holds up. But so far it's been about a month and it's been fine. And if needed, if anything starts to sag or move, I can adjust this easily. I can just put a it's light enough where you could put a car jack under there and lift it up and put more gravel underneath if it's sagging here. Now, if it actually starts sagging in this 2x4 or 2x12s, which I'm kind of worried about that, I could always put in more 6x6 posts. And then what I'm probably gonna do down here is I'm probably going to get some foam sheets for insulation and fill that gap, and then cover this with wood, treated wood, so it'll all be kind of sealed up. But I can take it apart easily and deal with it. So anyway, we'll see how this works as far as the foundation. Your other option, if you wanted to build on beams or skids, this is what I thought about doing as well. You could set these down, and then on top of this, build your typical joist system with whatever 2x6s would probably be a good choice, and build it off that, and then build your cabin off that. So that covers that. Now, side note, you also have to get this completely level this way and the beams level. And that takes some time. That took me almost a full day to get the beams leveled with itself and then with each other. So after the foundation, start doing the walls. So focused on the front and the rear walls first, since those are the load-bearing walls. So built this, you built a wall on a flat surface. You lay out all your studs, and then you start nailing them. So you have the top plate, you have your sill plate, and then you have the studs in between. So these are all laid out 16-inch on center. The door gets kind of different with that, but we'll get into that in a second. So it's an 8-foot wall. Basically it's a square, horizontally it's 8 foot tall. These studs are all they're 3 inches under 8 foot to make up for the top and bottom 2x4s. So 2x4s are actually 1.5 by 3.5. So that's 1.5 there, 1.5 there. So anyway, 8 foot. So yeah, you would lay this on the ground and dry fit everything. So here with the door, you have to factor that in. So I knew how wide I needed my door to be. And so you make sure that these studs are that far apart. So then you have these, so you have to have these king studs here. And I believe these are jack studs that are holding up the header. So basically you got to really think ahead and make all those measurements out, like for how high the door is, that's how high the, studs have to be, etc. Then you're spacing out these crippled studs. So those end up being the 16-inch on center, like that. Then you have the extra studs for the king studs. So, and then with a header, so on a load-bearing wall like this, you need a header to disperse the weight. So it's not just, because otherwise this would sag. Like if this was just a 2x4, this would start to sag. It probably would take a long time for a small building like this, but it's worth doing a header, a proper header, which a lot of people would say you need a bigger header than this. But so this is a 2x6, so there's 2 of them, and in order to get that 3.5 inch width that you need to match your studs, you get 2 of these, and then you need a 1/2 inch piece of plywood, or, well, yeah, 1/2 inch piece of plywood, and then that gives you your full 3.5 inches. And then you're gonna nail these in a certain, you know, pattern like that kind of works. So, but yeah, you're laying all this out on the ground, like on a flat surface. Now, I just did it on this deck when it was all cleared. You could build the wall and do it that way. And then to make it easier, I did also put the siding on while it was down. So that's just 2 sheets of 4x8 siding. This is called T111 siding. Put that on, nail it while it's on the ground, and then you flip that whole wall up where you want it to be, and you got to mark that ahead of time. And then, like, what I did was I put a 2x4 here and attached it to this base and made sure it was level, moved it, well, plumb, you know, and nailed it up tight. So once that's up, then you can start firing nails into the sill plate. So I put a bunch in there. I put a couple every stud, basically. Some big, like 3.5 inch nails. You go 3-4 inch, whatever. So put that on there, and then I cut the siding out from this door opening. And, you know, it looks pretty sloppy right now, but I'll eventually put trim up there. So then you cut that out. Use a little bit of a hand saw. You actually used a chainsaw for some of it, and a circular saw. I drilled out where the corners were so I could see it and do it from the outside a little bit as well. It's kind of a learn as I go situation. So after that was up and secured, then I did the back wall, which was extremely easy comparatively. It's about, so it's shorter, so you did have to cut more studs and siding, but you know, it's about 6'2". And so you're laying that out, 16 inch on center on the ground, and then you're nailing them in. You're nailing, you know, this, you're nailing up here into these, and then I nailed siding on, and then flipped it up, and it was up, you know. And then I did the same thing, secured it to the base beams with a 2x4 on each side, so it's nice and secure. Made sure it's level and where I wanted it, and then went on from there. So then once the front and back walls were up, I could move on to doing the rafters and really kind of link both walls together. So these are 2x6s, and we will go into that next. So with the rafters, again, they're 16 inch on center, so they're matching up with your studs for the most part. Right there. So all I did, I took these 2x6s, which are all 8 feet. Again, that's why I wanted this to be 7 by, I think, 2. So I'd have a little overhang on each side, and I wouldn't have to cut a bunch. So, because everything comes in 8-foot pieces for the most part, or longer. So I set those up on the front and back walls, and all I did was I basically just took that angle and transferred it to the rafters, And it's kind of hard to explain, but again, if you look at my video, you can kind of see what I'm doing there. And you're basically, I've never done this before. You're just cutting kind of a notch out, and after you do that on both sides. Let's take a look at the back. I didn't do like a fantastic job, but it's serviceable. Yeah, some of these are kind of bad. But like, so you got this, and then you got this horizontal, you got this vertical. And then, you know, if you want, you could shave, like I trimmed those at an angle just so it looked a little better. So once you get the first one, and it fits, and it looks like it works, then you use that as your template, and you're just marking the rest of them up and cutting them. So as you can see here, I mean, it's not perfect at all, but it is very secure. It'll work. And I went over the cuts sometimes. I also had a handsaw, which I didn't use here, but so with a circular saw, you can only get so far into that corner without going over to get the piece that if you don't go over, is what I'm saying, there'll be a chunk left in there, and you'll have to use a handsaw to get it out. So here I just zipped past on each, and there was no chunk left, but then you're losing some strength here. So the rafters went up fairly easily. I just nailed them and screwed them on an angle into the walls, the top of the walls, and then put up this bird block, which is 2x6, and that really helps secure them to each other as well. So this bird block obviously otherwise is necessary because stuff could just get in there. And I wish in the back I would have moved them out farther, like up to this, so I wouldn't have all this gap action. But I just filled this up so it's all puffed out. But anyway, eventually to finish this off, you can get a board here, like a fascia board, and then a soffit board, and it'll look nice and finished. And then what I'm planning on doing up here, I could finish that off and put a cap on there, roof cap, so it looks better, but I am gonna wait, and I'm gonna build like a front porch off of that and attach to those rafters that are sticking out and to the bird block. So for now, I'm leaving it open. It's rained really hard, and there hasn't been any issues with rain getting in there, so I'm okay with it. So next up, were the sidewalls. All right, so sidewalls, what I did, there's a couple ways you could do this, but I match the height on the sidewalls to my rear wall. And then I figured I could just make some 2x4s going up as nailers to nail the siding into. You could run this all the way up and cut it at an angle and attach it to these rafters. Now these aren't really doing anything structurally. They're just walls, you know, they're not like holding anything up. I mean, they are helping that rafter, but the main walls holding the structure of the roof and anything on the roof are the front and rear walls. So you can kind of go do you got a little more leeway. So I built these walls 6x2, I believe, to match that, and to match so they would fit in here. So this one was super easy. I did not side these until I got them up, so I just put the walls up. This one was a little trickier with the window, but all you got to do is find a window. This was a 24-inch by 24-inch rough opening, and you just have to measure that out and make sure 24 by 24 is going to fit in your opening. Give it a little more space because you can always shim it and things like that. So that's kind of how this worked out. So it looks like, you know, you got close studs here and there. But that's trying to keep 16-inch on center, like there, 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 and then basically throwing a couple extra in, you know, as supports. So did that, did not put the window in, did this 2 sidewalls up to this height, and then I started putting in these pieces here to nail the siding on. And I just screwed those in to the top and bottom, kind of toe-nailed. Did that here. Now I had to double up these because the 4-foot sections were going to be slightly off, and you want that 4-foot section of siding to end on the middle of a stud so you can nail it and get the other one on there. So that's why I had to add extra nailer stud basically, and then I had to do that there as well. That was just kind of I didn't plan for that because this wall was started on the inside here, not on the outside, if that makes sense. Trying not to get too far into the weeds here. So at that point, I had these walls up, no siding on. What I did next after that, actually I might have done this before, I forgot to mention the skip sheathing up here. Let's talk about that. All right, so get the rafters up. What you're going to have to do if you're doing a metal roof is add the skip sheathing. It is just something you're going to screw the roof into. So you want to put these boards and attach them to your rafters. So you're doing that typically at 1 foot on center or 2 foot on center. I could have definitely done 2 foot on center instead of each foot. It was totally overkill, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And it's not going to hurt anything. It was just more work. So I measured that out. So those were about 9 feet. So I had a few inches overhang on each side. That was my plan. In addition, they had to be 9 feet because this roofing material comes in sections that are 3 foot wide by 8. So the 8 foot was covered. And then this way I didn't have to cut anything, which was my goal. So 3 foot, 3 foot, 3 foot. So that's why you got to pre-plan everything, which I discovered quickly. So they are 1 foot on center, these skip sheathing boards, and 9 foot across. So you install those. A little side tip, with the excess you use for these little gap fillers, and you just nail those onto this rafter. Technically you could just use like some foam or something instead of that, but why not? It actually worked out really well to use those little extras. You can kind of see up there. Fill that gap right up. So that might be a little bit less than 9 feet actually. across. So after you get the skip sheathing on, then you can start putting the roof on. Hey guys, up here looking at the roof. So here's what basically what you got to do is pre-drill the holes that you're going to use to screw in the roof. They do have self-tapping screws as well for roof, for metal roofing, so you could use that. I wanted to make sure the measurements were correct with the spacing and everything, so I just figured it'd be easier to pre-drill the hole, so that's what I did. So on this one here, I put way too many screws in. I was looking at some specs for Florida, and they said like every freaking ridge, like all this crap, probably because they get hurricanes, I'm assuming. And so I went crazy. I went every foot on each side of these ribs. Not necessary. So I realized here on these last two, you didn't have to do that. So I still went on each side of the ridge on the bottom and the top, and then I just went every 2 feet. So again, you're laying these out on the ground, you're putting a tape measure on there, and I know that I have skip sheathing every foot on center, and they're pretty wide, so you have a lot of room there for mismeasurements. It could be right here a little bit, it could be up here, doesn't really matter. So you're laying these on the ground and you're pre-drilling holes, and then you put it up here and you're installing these screws, which have this little nice gasket, and you do not have to over tighten these. You just get them snug. If you over tighten them, these rings blow out, or it'll bend your roof. So you can kind of tell when it gets nice and snug and this thing kind of spreads a little bit, that you're good. This was actually, the roof was actually way easier than I thought it was going to be, and very satisfying to have it done. Again, shed style roof, so just one angle, very easy. There's no ridge cap, and then you're not going into another. So this is just throwing 3 sheets on here, no cutting, nada. Oh man, I filled these up, these little gaps, with this spray foam because I had bees going in there and making nests. But I got a little out of control. Oh my God. Anyway, so that was the roof. Much easier than anticipated. Don't be intimidated by that. If you pre-drill the screws, it's so easy just to get up there and start zipping them in. Zipping the screws, zipping them. So next up was putting the siding up on the sides, because I already did the front and the back when I was framing the walls. Like I said, when it was on the ground, I just nailed all the sheets to the front and the back, and I flipped them up. Done. Couldn't really do that with the sidewalls. So after the roof was up, I just took measurements. Now this was kind of tricky, but you basically are taking a measurement on this end, and then, so these are 4x8 sheets. So this sheet ends here. So now I was just covered up on this end. I just covered up the window and cut it out later. So you're taking a measurement there, which that's 8 feet. So you didn't have to do anything there. And then you're taking a measurement here. And then you're drawing an angle from that to this. And I actually did a template for this angle on a scrap piece of siding so I could make sure it fits. So I didn't want to have to waste this siding because it's fairly expensive. So flop that up there, nail it all in. Kind of tricky, but at that point, once this was all nailed in, I cut this opening for the window. I had to use a handsaw to really get in there. This side I did not have to do that. Obviously no window. So I was just slapping it up, making sure that angle's right. That is tricky. I mean, that takes practice if you've never done it. So then after that, I put in the window. So this was super easy to install. It just has a flange that is for screwing and nailing, goes all the way around. And you just throw a couple screws in. Don't get it super crazy tight because this can get warped because this is just basically plastic. So you put a couple screws in, like right that one there. You know, it's not super tight or anything. And then I put flashing tape on there. That's just for water intrusion, so water doesn't get in there. On something like this, you probably don't have to do that. And I'm gonna put trim over that eventually. So that was super easy. The opening was correct. The door, since I already had it, it already had hinges on it. You're just screwing the hinge, the hinges to your studs. Now, if you had a door that was pre-hung in a frame, I mean, that would be easy as well. That's just, you have to make the opening however big it tells you for the rough opening, and then you put the whole frame in. And typically you would just be attaching that to the studs and shimmying it as needed. So those are the main components. So yeah, those are the main components. Then there is trim and obviously painting and anything else you want to do. So I trimmed this out. I had to do that because there was a gap there. So I just used scrap pieces of siding. I just cut them with the circular saw down these edges, and I had to use a couple because it's not one full piece, and then you're cutting this angle at the ends, and that actually I think looks pretty good for what it is. So again, did that here. So yeah, I mean, there's still plenty more little things to be done. This is all rough looking. I want to do trim, corner trim, one piece here, one piece there, seal it up, caulk it, all that stuff, which I will eventually do. But yeah, I mean, that is pretty much the gist of it. There's certain things I had to do to come back, like, seal everything really well. Like, bugs just started getting in here like crazy. Like, there was some wood boring beetles I had to treat that were just immediately coming, like, swarming and trying to get in here. And it's right adjacent to trees that I just cut down. So that was a factor. But yeah, I mean, there's just stuff, you gotta seal it up. Like, Like I sealed these little gaps, and then I'll eventually put some type of flooring down. I just sealed all these little things because there was a wasp nest right here when I showed up this time, because I haven't been here in a couple weeks. So, I mean, to finish this off, I'll probably just do some paneling, like insulate it, do some paneling, and that's about it. But yeah, basically what I was looking for, I just wanted a place to sleep. 7x8, you know, or 7.2x8, whatever it is, was perfect. This bed fits in perfect. There's room for the dog. I'm not going to be storing a bunch of stuff in here. I just wanted to not sleep in a tent on my property. Eventually, I will probably build something bigger or just more of these, like in a modular fashion, where I have like a kitchen that's this size, storage, you know, building, or a couple storage buildings. But it took me about 5 days and less than $1,200. That's not a bad deal for what you're getting here. An actual shelter. So, any questions, throw them in the comments. Again, if you want to check out the actual build video, it's like 1 or 2 videos back. It's about 8 minutes long. It'll show you how I did it somewhat quickly, but the actual building of it is there. So, yeah, give it a try, man. Build it in your backyard. It's fun. Majority of tools that I use for real right here. Brought up a bunch of batteries, hammer, bunch of nails, bunch of screws, hand saw. Trying to think what else. That was pretty much, oh, well, no, I'm sorry. You need a level as well. A speed square is very helpful. A pencil, things like that. Yeah, level is very necessary, obviously, but not that much.